This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. Have we been lied to for many, many years by shred guitarists and instructors about how to actually get fast at guitar? The answer is no. But there are about two people in the world who think we are. One of them is Martin Miller, amazing player, and then someone else kind of remade his video kind of recently, which is what popped up in my feed, and I thought let's talk about that a little bit because I kind of feel like there's a little bit of being lost in translation. Now, where I'm presuming a lot of some of this frustration and stuff comes from is possibly from people that are learning or trying to play faster a little bit later in life. Now, what I'm assuming is that, and this is kind of true of most of my friends who play guitar and people that I know, is that actually the time when you make most speed gains, I think generally tends to be sort of in your teen years, and I feel like there's some sort of element of importance to this. So, you know, my fastest that I ever played was didn't take that long to get there, if you get what I mean. So in terms of sheer speed, that was kind of, I would sit with a keyboard. I'll show you some of this stuff anyway. But as the years go on, my focus shifted from speed and onto, I guess what we then start to think about more is kind of accuracy and things like that. So I feel like there might be some nugget of truth in what like Martin Miller has said specifically. I guess what we're really talking about here is like for people that have felt like they've been able to play the same thing at the same speed for a long time maybe, or what feels like a long time, but can't push through whatever that barrier is. And there is a question for me about whether that barrier for people like Martin Miller, Tom Quayle, you know, that might have been broken when they were relatively young, sort of teenage years. If you watch old videos of Tom Quayle, for instance, not that old videos, but videos from sort of 2006, 2007, 2008, he's actually a far less accurate player, in my opinion. He's still a fast player, but what seems to me to happen over the years is that you sort of mature and things that, yeah, to me, he's now a more accurate player in terms of time and elements like that, which sort of change. For me personally, my personal kind of story on this, I grew up kind of listening to Gary Moore, Thin Lizzy, and then got into like Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, and then Dream Theater. And by the time I was into Dream Theater and stuff like that, I was very into the metronome. And I think that is common for almost any person who plays fast. Almost. There may be the odd exception, but I think there are general principles, and it's not just guitar where these things come from anyway. So the traditional advice is, of course, to play the thing and learn the thing that you're trying to play fast slowly. This is obviously the case and obviously the way to go, because the thing that both Martin and this other guy kind of said was that if you're learning to run, you don't get any faster by walking. Well, I've actually watched a kid grow up over the last 16 months. The progression is slow, but it is obvious, and the walking happens. And as she gains confidence walking, she starts to try to running. And yeah, basically she didn't come out of the womb and start trying to run. The reason that I think that people say you should start off slow is because oftentimes, and this is in my own kind of personal teaching and stuff like that, people tend to want to play faster. They have a tendency to try and play something faster than maybe they're ready to. And then just what happens is that you continue to make mistake after mistake after mistake, and you just quickly get frustrated and stuff like that. You do want to start slow. The thing that they talk about is kind of chunking, and you really only get anywhere with this chunking idea if you start off slow anyway. So either way, you're going to start off slow. So let's the sort of thing that I would have been doing a lot of growing up was just 3-note per string ideas, and just the idea of taking all positions of the major scale and just running up and down it. So literally I would get home from school, I'd go and do some skateboarding, and then I would stick a keyboard on, playing a backing track in whatever key I was going to play in, and it would just be on a static chord. And one of my actual goals was literally just to put it on like 180 and try and do this as fast as I could. I don't think I could actually do that as fast as I used to be able to do it, or as fast as I thought I used to be able to do it. But maybe that is kind of the element of truth in what they're saying, in that you want to maybe put your goal past where you want to get to, exist in that space. So what I was actually trying to do at the time is just run up the scale. And do that sort of thing as fast as I could. So 6 notes per beat is what I was thinking there. And this was, yeah, kind of, I'd spent quite a lot of time in this kind of space. And I think this must have been where I made most kind of speed gains and started to figure out that the fingers and hands, that coordination part. So I would say that might be a good idea, I guess, because I can't think of how else I would have actually got 2 things going on. One of which is like I'm seeing the G major scale as I'm practicing it here quite clearly now in the 3-note per string positions, but I'm also running up and down the scale at whatever the tempo is. This is the other problem with what I've seen is the advice for in a very limited way, but it seems like they're talking about the sorts of things where like where it's like a super repetitive pattern. And okay, so even to get to there, it's going to take the person who's not au fait with shredding a lot of kind of this kind of thing. So what I would say is that you're still going to have to, even if you follow this idea of kind of a chunking method, there's still going to be a bunch of time spent where you're going to be going from kind of not being able to play the passage, where you need to bake in this idea. And I was talking about this in terms of learning licks and learning improvisation. I think it's the same sort of idea where you're baking in a piece of physical movements, so that you're not having to think about each one of them along the way. But as you're learning the piece of information, this is why we go slow, that takes time to actually bake in as a coordination under our fingers which feels natural. And you can't really just race straight through that and get to speed, in my opinion. You'll just maybe find yourself frustrated. So like if I just try to because it's simple, I can kind of get away with it a little bit. But if it was a more complex movement over time, then for sure you need to spend hours baking in the idea. So what if you're someone who's got the idea under your fingers? Well, I guess my first question would be, can you actually play the thing confidently, slow and accurately? And then the process really does start. And what I've actually found is that you get comfortable with the idea that your technique actually kind of changes as you start to play faster. So for instance, for me, as I'm playing the thing slowly, I would be focusing on like it being more wrist movement. But that kind of has to flatten out as you get faster, basically, is what I've found personally. Now, everyone picks slightly differently. Yngwie Malmsteen, for instance, seems to be a very relaxed guy. With his picking, I mean. Whereas, you know, there are players that are kind of very tense in the elbow, kind of like John Petrucci and stuff. I think I am more of a tense player than not. So that's at 100 BPM, this particular little thing. And I'm showing you this with a short idea, but it would take way longer than this with a much longer idea. 120. So with a simple idea, you can do it maybe a bit quicker, jump through the process quicker. So you notice that the technique is probably starting to change. Do you know what I mean? So you can keep pushing through this stuff, I guess. What I might think about doing is slowing down a click and then figuring out if I'm playing anything in time. like it's starting to become just a bit of a mess by this point, right? So I think for me personally, I would just slow things down again. But I think when I was a kid, I would have probably just continued pushing through and not really worried about things. I think in general that might not have been entirely positive because I think I started to then neglect things like time. But in terms of actually feeling like I could play fast, which I think is part of this stuff, is sort of belief, and not necessarily worrying too much about accuracy. I think there is some truth to what they're saying in that you need to start to think, right, I just want to push past wherever I'm at. So here's another thing that I'm working on at the moment. This kind of thing. So if it's more complicated like this, like I can't just go, alright, I'm going to go for sheer speed. Right, I can try and start to get it up. It is a great idea to try going between sort of half time and full speed. But this kind of thing, I think there is, particularly for things that aren't really, really simple, you simply can't just suddenly play it fast. So it is, for all of this stuff, a gradual thing about trying to add that speed over time, incrementally. It might take days and weeks and months and years, depending how difficult the thing is. Let's just keep going up to 150. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I do think there is an element of truth to this where I think you're definitely going to need to keep in mind that you still need to start everything slow. But I think there is a point where I think Martin definitely does have a point where if you just continue over focusing on being super accurate, I think you're going to tend to overthink the thing. And then maybe you don't do that kind of teenage thing where we just push past the mistakes and gloss over bits where, I don't know, technique starts to fall apart. But maybe spending time in that space where things aren't necessarily working as much, where it feels a bit uncomfortable, where you're not necessarily playing super in time with the click. Maybe there is some nugget of spending more time in that kind of area, specifically if you're trying to build speed, so that you build speed, maybe. I don't know. It's a bit of a complicated one. I think you definitely need to spend lots of time. I think most people don't focus that much on really getting things accurate slowly. I think myself personally as well, I skip over that part. I want to get the thing faster, and I don't think it's always positive, but sometimes I think it's time to just say, well, let's try and get past that point. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. That lick I was learning at the end there is a lick from yesterday. That's up on Patreon if you want to check that out with the backing track. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Cheers.